Hello and welcome back to the Salary Step-Up series. This is step 9 in the Salary Step-Up series, and in this step we're going to get into negotiation. We're also going to be dealing with negotiation for the next two steps, 9 and 10, both deal with it. Because there's so many techniques, there's so much information. It's also probably one of the more important aspects of the salary increase process. It's one that most people also feel a little uncomfortable with because it's involving a negotiation, which is obviously something that most people don't involve themselves with on a daily basis or even annually. Very few people, in fact, even with cars now and houses, people will tend to not negotiate very much. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into the negotiation, and I want to define it by two basic categories. First of all, the hard negotiations or hardball negotiations, and then the soft negotiations or softball. And you'll hear them called by a lot of different names, but ultimately the difference being, if you want to negotiate from a very strong, almost defiant type of perspective, position, you'll see this done when one party holds all of the cards. When that person can dictate terms, you'll see really hard negotiations. You will do X. The problem is that doesn't work well when you're having an ongoing relationship with the party that you're negotiating with. So if you're going to negotiate with your boss and try to use hard negotiation tactics, you're probably going to find that it damages your relationship with them, and you can be seen in a very unfavorable light. On the other hand, with a soft style of negotiation, one of the key elements of that being a win-win, where you try to find that common ground. And using that negotiation style, you will be able to incorporate all these other aspects of the Salary Step-Up series, the rapport building and all of those other things that go into building a good relationship. Okay, so first thing I want you to consider is who you're negotiating against, and then what do you want. If you have these two items clearly defined, you'll be able to tailor your negotiations to finding a problem that you can solve for them at the same time you're acquiring what you've identified as your goal. When you are looking at who you're negotiating against, it may not be just the person. It might be if there's budgets involved or particular aspects of your employment that you need to work around. Also, if there's more than one person, you may be requesting your pay request through your boss, but they may have to go up and get it approved at a higher level. So understanding how they're going to be receiving it and how they're going to deal with it once it ends up in their lap, in their possession, how are they going to be dealing with that information? So understanding the other party, and then when you're understanding what you want, that has an aspect of what are you going to be willing to give up and what you're not going to be willing to give up. And it might be a tiered process. So as we move through this, I want you to always be thinking about where will you draw the line? Where is it critical? The answer to the question of this is something I will not give in on. It is something that I would walk away from this job if I didn't get this. The other things being, yeah, I'll give this up, or I'll concede this or concede that, and have that give and take. And it's important to have some of that built in, not just that you're building in something that you can give away, oftentimes called throwaways, but more of having something that, yeah, you would want to have it. It is valuable to you, but you're willing to have a little less of it or wait a little while before you receive it. Some of those give and takes will help the other party find that common ground with you. Okay, I want to point something out. I've structured the Salary Step-Up series in segments, in steps. That's to make it easier to get your head around the process. There's one thing I want to point out about this, though. The presentation, as it's proceeding, is not exclusive of the negotiation. You have two layers. At some point, the presentation will stop, but the negotiation will continue. And so I don't want you to think that this happens and then that happens. Maybe their key components happen separately, but in negotiating, you will be dealing with some negotiation aspects during the presentation process. That being things like the objections that come up during the presentation and other items like that. Okay, that being said, I want to point out that we want to use the right phrasing. The right phrasing being something like asking for a $2 an hour pay increase instead of a $4,000 and change pay increase over a year's time. It may have the same dollar amount, and we're not pulling the wool over somebody's eyes. They're going to know what these things are, but we want the initial thought that they have to be, oh, that sounds reasonable. $2. $2 is nothing, right? $2 an hour. You know, a few bucks during the day. That's, you know, no big deal. It's not going to bust anybody's budget. So if you use it that way, that's a whole lot easier than to say $4,000. If you want $4,000, that's something you got to really look at the bank account and see if that's going to be in there every month to make that payment to this employee. So what we want to do is use those types of things. Another one would be a percentage. Say, I want a 5% pay increase, or I want a 10% pay increase. Those numbers are easier for them to hear. They might have to think about it, but their initial reaction is not going to be a visceral pulling back, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. We want to keep them involved in the presentation process. So when you do this, I'm calling this a negotiation tactic, I want your verbiage to be such that you are not shutting them off and you're not causing them to distress about what you're asking for until you're done with your presentation. Not that I want them to distress at that point either, but you get where I'm going with this. It is an idea of making the initial offering very easy to accept. Okay, fine. We're talking a small percentage. Okay, we're fine. We're talking about a small dollar amount per hour. But avoiding the big dollar amount or the big increases to, if you're asking for insurance benefits increases, the dollar amount on those can be huge. But it might sound real easy to say, hey, I want to put my spouse on my insurance. So something like that's real easily said, and it sounds reasonable when it's asked. Recently, I've been asked, what about presenting your request in a range? Like, I would like to have a pay increase between this and this. I think the reason why people want to pose it that way is because it sounds like that's easier to present and that your boss is going to see that you have some give and take already in that. The problem with it is, first of all, to answer the question, I do not agree with that tactic at all. And I'll give you the reasons why. First, it makes you come off weak. If you don't know what you want and you can't pin that to an exact dollar amount, then my thought is going to be you haven't done your homework, you're not really sure, and I'm going to immediately, if I'm your boss and you're asking me for that pay raise, I'm going to go to the lowest number as my starting number. And then I'm going to go down from there. I'm going to say, well, I could maybe do the smaller end at the bottom end of that, and let me do some number crunching. I'll come back to you, and when I come back, guess what? It's going to be even lower than that. You are never going to get the person to say, yeah, absolutely. In fact, we'll give you the high number. In fact, we'll go above that high number. So it makes you look weak, and it sets the bar too low. If your range was your request number was at the bottom and you went up from it, you could make a case that, you know, as a tactic you could show that you're willing to come down from that. But again, I don't agree with that in the sense that it shows too much ambiguity. You want to be more specific, you want to be more professional about it and say, here's what I want. Now, you could be prepared to say, I'm willing to come down on this one item over here, my pay raise, if I get these other benefits. Now, if you're tying them together, you're not really coming in and saying, here's this range. You're saying, I want this, this, and this. Oh, I can't have all of this one, I'll come down a little bit and I still get these two, great. And so that's part of the overall negotiation, but that's not presenting in a pay range, a pay raise request in a range. Avoid that at all costs. It never works. All right, one aspect I want to talk about for a moment is that we have the negotiations that are going at the same time as the presentation. So when you have an objection, if the other party tries to derail what you're presenting and they're throwing in objections and it's interfering with your presentation, I want to give you one technique to consider using, and think about other techniques that might work. We're going to get into several, and I want you to decide what fits best with what you know about your boss and in the culture of the company that you work for, in the industry that you work in. Which items are going to best fit? So one that I would recommend you do is that if there are objections, I would first try to just say, I understand that you've got questions about this and I want to make sure I answer them, but if you would let me just finish my presentation and then we can discuss that, that'd be great. A lot of people, that's all it's going to take. Other people will be a little bit more interfering with the process. They're going to try to knock you off your presentation because they already see there's going to be a negotiation. They already see that you're trying to accomplish something that they're uncomfortable with. Now, with those people, I will tend to let them go off on their little tangent for a little bit, and if it starts to go too far, I'll actually disengage physically. If I have a pen in my hand, I'll set it down. Not loud, I'm not trying to be rude, but I want to show them that I'm stepping away from my presentation, and I'm going to listen to them. And I hear them out, and then I will say to them, okay, I understand what you're saying. If you don't mind, I really would like to wait until I'm done presenting my material, because I think that I address a lot of what your concerns are in that. But also, if I'm hearing you right, I'm hearing X, Y, Z, and I do address those. All right. Now, let's say that that's still not enough for them. They interrupt again. When they do that the next time, you do the same thing. You disengage. You listen to what they're saying. Make sure that you're paying attention and you're hearing what they're saying, because they are giving you information you need for this negotiation. But what we want to do is send them a message, because they are trying to take control of the process, and we do not want them to feel that they have complete control. We want them to feel that there has to be a give and take. We also want them to feel comfortable, but not that they are the only party making decisions here. So what I want you to do is, you can use a pregnant pause. You can use silence to interrupt what their thought process is and their train that they're trying to get you on. So as they're talking, you say, okay, I understand what you're saying. You're nodding. I mean, that's the nodding. You're not actually saying it. And after they finish, just kind of look at them, nodding your head, thinking, maybe even writing a couple of notes down, but you're remaining silent. And then say, I don't know if I've offended you here with what we're talking about. I hope that's not the case. Now, you probably have not offended them, and they're going to think, well, that's kind of odd. And my intent here wasn't to offend my employee that's presenting to me, and they definitely didn't offend me. So they're going to say something that's more like, oh, no, you didn't offend me. And say, well, okay, well, I understand then. And I can definitely help address that issue, but I'd like to finish my presentation. And when they have been faced with, oh, what I'm saying to my employee, trying to derail or try to redirect, is causing them to think that I'm offended, or maybe now I'm offending them, then that silence has made them very uncomfortable for a little while, and it shuts them down. In most cases, a little bit of silence goes a long way, and then a phrase like, I'm sorry if I offended you, or I did not intend to offend you, something along those lines. You want it to be a little bit more extreme than what it really is. You don't want to just say, oh yeah, I hear what you're saying. You already tried that the first time. and it didn't work. You need to do something to regain control, and that's where you use something that's a little bit off. I'm sorry I offended you, a little bit more silence so that you can build that discomfort with them. You're the one in control because you're the one that is controlling how long this silence is going to last. So now you've finished the presentation, and they do have some questions and objections in most cases. If they didn't, and they go, yep, sounds great, thank you very much, shake their hands, you're done. The next part of this, though, is they're going to say, well, what about this, what about that? You want to try to get all of their concerns, all of their objections, anything that they're wrestling with, you want to get that all at one time. And the reason is that as you're getting their list of concerns and objections, you're able to categorize those and you're able to see where the weight of their concern is. If you start to deal with one at a time, there's the possibility they may say, oh, well, it's this dollar amount is our problem. So now you start negotiating the dollar amount. Oh, well, I can give a little here, I can do a little of this or that. What you are doing there is you're starting to concede without knowing their entire list of concerns. So let's get the whole list, and then once you've got it, ask them a question. Say, all right, so here I see where your concerns are. I can assume then if we get these addressed to your satisfaction that we are in agreement. There obviously is going to be some ambiguity there, and they say, well, reasonably, yeah. So, but what you want to do is get them to agree that that is the list, and that you're really not expecting to see that list grow anymore. So what we want to do is make sure that we get all their concerns and objections at one time, then we're going to move on from there dealing with those objections. Okay, I want to spend a little bit of time on one last item on this step, and it's when to say yes. Now, the when to say yes is also understanding when to say no, having a control of your own thoughts and understanding where you want to be. But it's a little bit more than just understanding the process and know where your lines are. It's also having an awareness in the negotiation that when the other party has agreed to what your request is, to just say thank you. You don't have to finish with all of your prepared materials, with all of your negotiation tactics that you've practiced. Just understand that you've accomplished what you wanted, even if you only had to use 10% of what you prepared. You don't want to sit there and negotiate and negotiate and negotiate after they have said yes, because you will work your way out of what your agreement is. Once the other side agrees to your request, you smile, shake their hand, and say thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to step 10, and in step 10, you're going to get more of the negotiation tactics. Like I said before, the negotiation aspect of this whole process is oftentimes the scariest for most people. So looking at these tactics and understand that you get to pick and choose which ones you feel comfortable with and which ones you think will work best for you. Understand too that the negotiation is just communicating. It's communicating with a definite purpose to accomplish something. So if the word negotiating is scary to you, if you think of negotiation as negotiating with that used car salesman or whatever that might be that triggers that fear in negotiation, or that you're trying to impose your will on someone, back off of that phrasing and just think of negotiating as a give and take communication to accomplish a goal. All right, with that said, we're going to move on to step 10, and this is the Salary Step Up series. I'm Rick Richardson. Thank you for watching.